said she came in depressed, and I don't want to get just off on a tangent about the pandemic, but what you describe is so vividly, Reich's basic thing: love, work, and knowledge are the wellsprings of our life. Those are vital functions that are there from, I believe, the moment we're born to the moment we die. Doing something productive is work, and loving is the connections with other people, and curiosity and exploring is the knowledge function. So she had that one cut off. So as you said, she had no natural outlet for her energy.
Welcome to the A Different Kind of Psychiatry podcast, brought to you by the ACO. I'm Dr. Crist. Each month, we feature a case presentation, interview, or discussion by one or more of our doctors who practice a different kind of psychiatry. We are interested in your questions and comments, and I would love to hear your feedback. Send an email to aco@orgonomy.org. The best way to help the ACO spread its knowledge is by letting others know about us. We'd love for you to leave a rating and review. You can do so on Apple Podcasts, Amazon's Audible, and Spotify. If you're interested in attending one of our webinar presentations, you can meet the doctors and join in on the discussion afterwards. You can connect with us and learn more at orgonomy.org or adifferentkindofpsychiatry.com. This episode features the audio from one of our webinars. Dr. Howard Chavis tells Dr. Peter Crist about a number of patients he treated in which his immediate understanding of what was going on emotionally and how they characteristically handle themselves allowed him to treat them effectively.
Hello, I'm Dr. Peter Crist. I'm here today to host the latest in the American College of Orgonomy's A Different Kind of Psychiatry webinar series. And today we have Dr. Howard Chavis joining us to talk about the benefits of an immediate understanding of a patient's character. Welcome, Dr. Chavis. So let me just say a few words about Dr. Chavis before we get into our discussion. So Dr. Chavis is in private practice in psychiatry, treating adults and children in Manhattan and Scarsdale, New York. He is also board certified in psychiatry and medical ergonomy. And this year, Dr. Chavis became editor of the Journal of Ergonomy. So welcome, Dr. Chavis. And I also want to welcome everybody who has joined us today. I understand we have people from around the world, all the way from the West Coast of the US to Greece. And those who are with us from Europe, thank you for staying up late on a Saturday. And those in the West Coast, thank you for joining us on an early Saturday afternoon. So Dr. Chavis, usually we have people present a single case, and today you've decided to present three short cases for discussion. So tell us what made you decide to take that approach?
Of course, but first I'd like to say hello, Dr. Crist, and also a hearty hello to all the members of the audience scattered across the globe. I've selected three patients who illustrate the importance of observation. And what I mean by observation is seeing who the person is in front of me, including characteristic ways that the person protects themselves emotionally. This allows me to understand how the patient functions emotionally, and can provide me the understanding of how to effectively address the difficulties and problems that the person brings for treatment.
So Dr. Chavis, why don't you go ahead and tell us about the first case, and we'll get into some discussion about it and then move on to the other ones.
Okay. The first patient is a 32-year-old woman who comes to me unhappy, depressed, a bit angry, and anxious. And as she tells me her story of how she lives with a man who doesn't treat her well, who in fact abuses her emotionally, I notice that she occasionally smiles. And I point out to her in a soft, gentle way, "Are you aware that you're smiling?" And she's not. Mm-hmm. And then she continues with her account of living with this bum. And I point out to her again, "Are you aware that you are smiling, and she's not.
Mhm.
And gradually, what she sees or what she feels is that, yes, she's angry, and she knows that, but she's not aware of just how angry, in fact, furious she is about how her live-in boyfriend treats her.
So one question that comes to my mind already is how do you know when to do something like point out that smile as opposed to asking her for more history about the situation and about her?
Yeah, that's a great question, because what I'm looking at is how the person presents themselves. And if she's telling me that she's angry, but how she sounds and how she looks is incongruous with the emotion, then I pointed out to her her smile. I didn't go into why she's smiling. I just pointed out that she was smiling. And that helped her make better contact. Not only that she was angry, but just how angry she was.
Mm-hmm. And so can you tell us more what happened then from there?
Yeah. Well, I saw her for a second session, and we got into how she might handle the situation with her boyfriend. And it became clear that just given how angry she was, she wanted to actually end the relationship. She had had enough. But what came to her at that time emotionally is her fear of speaking up, and speaking up effectively for what she actually wanted was to get rid of him. And so that second session included both an expression, her expressing her anger more effectively and with the intensity that she felt it, as well as her making contact with her fear of speaking up for herself. The third session, interestingly enough, she came in and she said, I got rid of him. She kicked him out, which was great. And the other thing that she said, interestingly enough, is that when she was a young girl, her friends called her Smiley. So even back then, this was a characteristic behavior for her. And presumably it served exactly the same function. It kept her out of touch with either her anger or just how angry she was. By the fourth session, therapy was terminated. She didn't need to see me anymore because she was no longer unhappy. She was no longer miserable. She wasn't angry. And I treated her effectively, understanding a characteristic behavior of hers that was emotionally protective, and no medication was prescribed for her depression, her being depressed.
No, that's really great. And what I'm struck by is we have the concept of the red thread of somebody's character, that a central trait that they develop, incorporate into their character. And it sounds like with her, Smiley may be her red thread.
Yes.
And you were able to identify and pick that up. And we've said often in our training that if you can identify that red thread and point it out, it's like hitting a bullseye with an arrow. So the other thing that strikes me is that many people might say, well, she's no longer depressed because she ended this relationship, as if the problem is outside. But I wish you'd say a bit more about, because I think there's more to it, the connection between depression and anger.
Yes, well, it was clear that she characteristically did not allow herself to feel the emotion, and especially the intensity of the emotion. Mm-hmm. And thus the emotion stayed, and actually it stayed in her chest for the most part, and her throat. And so when she was finally able to feel the intensity of her emotion and to express it in the session, and then eventually to the person who was the source of her fury, then she was no longer depressed. It wasn't simply that she resolved the social situation.
Yeah, that's what I was sensing. Right. And I think that's a very important point for people to understand, is is there's a tendency for people to put their problems outside themselves, as if they solve the social thing, that will solve their emotional problems. But what we understand as character, the defenses get incorporated. You can change the external circumstances, but that won't necessarily change how you're handling it inside. And here with this woman in 3 sessions, you were able to help her change the dynamics of how she handled her emotions. So that's really, really wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure very satisfying. I mean, those cases where you can just catch it and see it and address it are so great. So
yeah, well, that's the title of my presentation. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's great. Is there anything more about that case you think would be good for us to talk about before we move on to another one?
I think that's pretty much it. What's surprising is how the observation leads to an understanding, an observation of how the person presents themselves, literally within seconds, as well as the characteristic way that the person protects themselves emotionally.
Yeah.
And the proof is in the pudding, because it led to an effectively addressing the difficulties that she brought for treatment.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so important to just underscore that in what we do as medical ergonomists, when we're doing character analytic work, addressing the character, we're dealing with how that person basically handles their emotions. That's the key. And so many other treatments would either medicate the depression and or anxiety rather than addressing the underlying basis for it. So
or they may go into the person's history as if that's crucial to understanding the patient. And my next patient illustrates exactly that point.
Okay, good. Well, let's hear.
Okay, so the next patient is a man who was in his early 60s. And I understood that he had seen over the previous 30 plus years, many, many different therapists, many types of therapy, and with no resolution to what he brought to the difficulties he brought to treatment. So he came into my office. He sits in the consultation chair. And if I can demonstrate, he puts his arm over the back of the chair and proceeds to give me a little bit of history. After literally 3 minutes, maybe it was 4 minutes, I said to him the following. I said, softly, directly, I said, do you feel as comfortable as you look? He just looked at me. He was taken aback. And after about 15 seconds or so, he said, no. He said, I do this to put you at ease so I don't feel anxious. Let me just say that no previous therapist over the previous 30 plus years of treatment, of therapy, had ever addressed what was right in front of them.
Yeah. No, that's so important. It's not that other therapists aren't well-intentioned, aren't good at what they do, but that understanding of character is really so crucial in the work that we do. And I think it differentiates it from so many other approaches. So then what happened with him?
Well, what happened is that initial observation on my part and his explanation led to several years of treatment where I addressed the various ways, the manifestations of how he avoided feeling anxious. And this affected his social functioning, his professional functioning, and also led to his developing somatic symptoms, physical aches and pains that then I could have actually effectively treated on the couch. So I treated both psychically and somatically the consequences or the manifestations of how characteristically, through his character, he tried to control interactions so as not to feel anxious. And that's addressing his character.
Right. What strikes me too, though, is that he was not aware. So it was right on the surface in some ways, but you captured it right at the point where he could become aware. So how did you know that was the thing to say and what would work?
Great question. Let me just deny being a magician. Okay.
All right, good.
This is not magic.
Yeah.
Because, through training and experience as a medical ergonomist, let's just say I'll speak for myself. I learned to trust what I see, what I observe, and what I also sense or feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so these sources of information, if you will,
yeah.
are so important in seeing, understanding, feeling, experiencing what's going on emotionally at any given second.
Mm-hmm.
Not even simply each minute, but every single second. And that informs me as to how I should address what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine a situation where you might have said that and it wouldn't have worked?
Yes. Again, at any particular moment, I make the choice between addressing something psychically through words, or in some fashion addressing what's happening emotionally, or making the choice and doing something, we call it biophysically, working physically, with the patient. As an example, I might not say, or I might say something, or I may just give, show an expression on my face, like,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really? Are you kidding? And I go by my instinct, and we call that contact, emotional contact of myself, with the person, the patient sitting in front of me. Mm-hmm. And that informs me how to respond.
Yeah, I think maybe many people don't. I think that's one of the things that we have to offer with doing these webinars, is giving people a glimpse of behind the scenes of what's going on with us as therapists, how we approach it. And so I really appreciate you just talking about these so-called little examples. It's those little things that make up the real wonderful aspect of the work that we do. And you just reminded me that I've always been scientifically oriented. I love observing, as you know, and we may be able to get into even more discussion about that. But that what I realized fairly early on is working with patients, I would get an impression like you're talking about. And every time I would say something, it really is an experiment to see what is the effect of what I'm saying. And there's some times where it's right on target, other times where it's not. And so along the line, I realized, let me just be sure that the patient isn't just going along with me. So I very often will say, if early in treatment with someone, if I ever say something that seems off the mark or isn't right, just tell me, challenge me, and invite them to do that. And I remember a woman where I said, it sounds like you're mistrustful. She said, no, I'm not mistrustful. I'm afraid of people. I thought, whoa, okay. She doesn't want to acknowledge she's mistrustful, but she can acknowledge she's afraid. So those kinds of things that you're talking about, picking up. This guy could hear you when you said, are you as anxious as you look? Yeah. I mean, are you as comfortable as you look? Yeah.
Right.
As relaxed as you look. So,
that's right.
Yeah. So anything else about this particular patient that you want to?
Well, again, we're talking about the importance. You and I are talking about the importance of observation. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give a bonus example from another patient.
Okay.
I used to work with the medically ill, hospitalized patients, seeing them as a psychiatrist. And I was asked to see a woman who had abdominal distension, meaning her stomach was distended, And she had what was called $1 million workup, meaning she was in the hospital for 10 days, 2 weeks, and every single test came back negative. And then they asked me, Sherlock Holmes, the psychiatrist, to see, from my perspective, what was going on. My consultation lasted maybe 30 minutes or so, but I made the diagnosis within 2.5 to 3 or 4 minutes. And how did this come about? I went into her room. I introduced myself. She was a young Chinese woman from Taiwan. And I said, "Tell me about yourself." And she said, "I'm married. I'm a mother of 2 young kids, and we live in New Jersey." And I think she must have said, "We have a home in New Jersey." So I said to her, my next question was, and this was totally instinctual on my part. It's not magic, but instinctual. I said, "And who else lives at home with you?" She looked at me and she said, "My mother-in-law." And she swallowed. I observed that she swallowed. And what did that tell me? I made the diagnosis. Her abdominal distension there was something going on with the mother-in-law where she was swallowing. Okay? We know that most air in the GI tract is from swallowed air. So then she went on to tell me, as I questioned her, that the mother-in-law was a wretch. She was critical, judgmental, harsh, ungrateful, that she was a guest in their home. And that because of the patient's own difficulty speaking up for herself and her cultural milieu, this was a Chinese culture where you have to respect your elders. She swallowed all of her natural, rational anger and then fury and frustration with this mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And that took about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And the resolution was that fortunately her husband told his mother, her mother-in-law, told his mother, time to leave and go back to Taiwan. Medical situation resolved.
Yeah. No, that's a great story.
And that's a bonus. That's the bonus.
Okay.
The observation.
Yeah.
I saw that she swallowed.
Right. So before we go on to the next case that you wanted to talk about, I want to just remind the audience to use the Q&A, write in your questions, and after we're done going through the cases, we'll take questions from the audience from you. So Dr. Chavis, go ahead and tell us about the third patient.
Yeah, the third patient is a woman in her early 80s, and she was gainfully employed full-time in a very responsible position until the pandemic hit. And she, along with many of her other co-workers, were actually furloughed. They were let go. So she hadn't worked for over a year when I saw her. And when I saw her for the first time in the office, she looked miserable, absolutely miserable. And when I said to her, "Well, tell me something about yourself," she told me that she was no longer working, that this was very difficult for her, that she was anxious, she was depressed. And I saw just how important work was for her. This is not simply a matter of ego gratification, but it was an essential part of her living and functioning. And absent work, there was no opportunity for her to be, let's say, productive and to discharge her energy. So what I was seeing, I realized from the very beginning, was an accentuation of all of her, let's say, her ordinary, I'll put it quote unquote, neurotic tendencies. It turned out that she was very harsh with herself. She was judgmental. She said just how sick she was, that she was crying at night and she couldn't sleep. But rather than being kind to herself, she was just very, very critical of herself.
Mhm.
So you might ask, well, what did I do?
Yeah. What did you do?
Very good question. I think I asked her if she had either medical training or a license to practice medicine. And this may appear to come out of the blue, but it didn't.
Mhm.
Because what she was doing in her crying, she was giving herself emotional first aid.
Uh-huh.
And I recognized that.
Mhm.
And what I was addressing was her characteristic tendency out of her character to be critical of herself.
Uh-huh.
And I was saying to her, give yourself a break.
Mhm.
What you're doing is right on target. And I told her that.
Mhm.
I didn't say what you're doing is right on target. I said, what you're doing is emotional first aid.
Mhm.
And that was in the first session.
Mhm.
And she appreciated that.
Uh-huh.
And it
Great.
also took her seeing something as pathological, her crying as pathological. And I said, this is an expression of your health.
Uh-huh.
This was in the very first session.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she had never heard that before.
Yeah. Yeah.
This woman, extraordinarily healthy,
Yeah.
extraordinarily healthy, enormous health in her. And I've told her over the course of time that I've treated her, just how much health there is in her and how I appreciated that. And each time that I saw it, I would say, you see, this is an example again of what I said from the very first session. This is the health in you.
No, that's wonderful, Dr. Chavis. And I mean, I think, again, differentiating some of what we do, that understanding that everybody has a healthy core in them.
Yes.
The terms that I've used is nature, character, and personality, but everybody has a healthy nature. And so many other disciplines just don't recognize that distinction between a healthy nature and the neurotic character. And if you don't make that distinction, you can't really make much progress, because I know that it's our connection as one human being to another, with the health in us and the health in the patient, that allows us to make an alliance to help them overcome the sickness in them. And just to identify it with her, that's really it's so simple, but sometimes the simplest things are the hardest things for people to see and
Yeah.
to do, and to do that can make such a huge difference. So
Yeah.
So tell us more about what happened with her then.
Well, another difficulty for her was her youngest daughter was very cruel to her.
Mm.
Very, very cruel. And initially she had difficulty accepting her own reaction to that, because she felt that the daughter was ungrateful, and my patient was angry about that.
Mm.
But because of her own life's experience, she had difficulty allowing herself to feel angry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I addressed the difficulty that she had accepting her anger. I didn't exactly call the daughter, the cruel daughter, a wretch,
Mm-hmm.
but I sort of did in some fashion,
Mm-hmm.
by asking her the question. I mean, who wouldn't be angry under this circumstance? Who wouldn't be angry that the daughter, that a child who you sacrifice so much for is ungrateful? And not only ungrateful, but cheap towards you or to you, basically mistreating you emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And by posing it in that way, by asking the question, I was allowing her, or giving her permission to feel angry.
Mm-hmm.
And where this led is that she decided that she was going to send her daughter an email.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so what she did was she started composing emails. We decided together mostly from her side, not to send, to send the email, which was, I think, the right decision to make. But week after week, she came in with stacks of emails that she never sent.
Okay.
And they were getting stronger and stronger and stronger until finally, and I'm chuckling, pardon me, but she said in one of her emails, "F you, bitch." Gold. This was gold.
For her to just be able to acknowledge it. Yeah.
And to express it. To say, even if she didn't say it to her daughter, she was saying it in the email. So at some later point, maybe a couple of weeks later, I told her, this may have appeared out of the blue, but I said to her, listen, I think maybe you could write a book, or you should write a book. Maybe the title of the book, or the title of the first chapter, should be F the bitch. And she laughed and laughed. We had such a hearty laugh.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that I share with many patients, but especially with her. And that is, I'll call it humor, but there's always a point. It's not like I'm thinking analytically or intellectually, but there's a point. For example, she said to me that she thought maybe she has another 4 or 8 years left to live. She's in her 80s. Yeah. So I said to her, you have to live to at least 100. She said, really? She said, why is that? So I said to her, because she hates Trump, okay? So I said to her, when you reach 100, you'll get a letter from the White House, from the president, acknowledging your 100th birthday, and it won't be from Trump. She laughed and laughed and laughed. We had such a hearty laugh.
So again, it sounds like you said she came in depressed, and there, I don't want to get just off on a tangent about the pandemic, but what you describe is so vividly, Reich's basic thing: love, work, and knowledge are the wellsprings of our life. Those are vital functions that are there from, I believe, the moment we're born to the moment we die. Doing something productive is work, and loving is the connections with other people, and curiosity and exploring is the knowledge function. So she had that one cut off. So as you said, she had no natural outlet for her energy. That backed up, but she also tended to take her frustration and anger out on herself. So for her to be able to express the anger was very similar to the first case of overcoming the depression. So, I mean, these cases really so nicely illustrate just basic principles about understanding character and how to work with that. So it's really great to hear them.
Thank you.
Is there anything more about that third patient?
Well, she's actively looking for work.
Okay, great.
She was sort of tied up for a period of time, but thanks to her treatment with me, she's actively engaged, both looking for work, and she's able to work. I mean, even though she's in her early 80s, she was a valued member, a valued component of the corporation she worked for. So she's actively looking for work, and she's more socially engaged with other people.
That's great.
And she's fabulous.
No, that's wonderful. I mean, I have that feeling. Sometimes the most exciting patients are decades older than some younger people that you would hope might be more exciting. It's just great to see the life, no matter what age.
That's right.
They're in them.
And I tell her that. I say, you are so alive. And that's quote unquote, that's what I say to her. You are so alive. Yeah.
So there's several different things that have come up in your discussion about these patients. I don't know why, but I was struck by, years ago, somebody pointed out that in our culture, there's a tendency for a difference between men and women. The typically women have a harder time expressing anger and are more likely to cry or be sad, and men are more likely to cover their vulnerability by getting angry. And it's not quite that the man was angry, but the emotions he was not going to show were the softer ones of anxiety or depression or anything like that. But the women had more trouble with mobilizing anger and would cry and be sad instead. So
yes.
The other thing, I do want to take a couple minutes and go back to what we were saying about observation, because you said in seconds, sometimes you know what's going on with people, and your title, The Benefits of an Immediate Understanding of a Patient's Character. And you know that in our seminars, other places, I've been emphasizing the functional approach of observe, observe, observe until a conclusion spontaneously comes to you from the phenomenon you're observing, not from some preconception or prejudice or distortion. And so the point is, somehow I think when I've talked about that, people think that may take a long time, but you're pointing out that the observations can be very quick and the conclusion can actually come spontaneously from what you observe within seconds. That's not magic. That's functional contact. And yes. I think it's crucial to underscore that. You know?
Yes.
And it's funny, I love tennis, as I think you have. And a while ago, I was thinking about, well, a tennis player doesn't have the time to observe and observe before they decide where to hit the ball. And then I saw an article, a study about different tennis players, and Roger Federer had much faster capacity to literally perceive what was happening with the ball.
Yes.
And so that's what you're talking about. If we're going to be world-class therapists, we need to improve our ability to perceive and our ability to perceive accurately and quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have another clinical example, a very, very brief one, if I might.
Sure.
Yeah. Again, when I was working with the medically ill as a psychiatrist, I was asked to see this woman in her 80s who the nursing staff thought was suicidal because she was refusing to eat. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I go in to see her. She's this little Jewish lady in bed. And I introduced myself and I said, I'm a psychiatrist. Why has the nursing staff asked me to see you, recommend that a psychiatrist see you? She says, I don't know. I said, well, let me tell you. They think you're suicidal because you're refusing to eat. Mm. She says, they never bring me a kosher tray. The whole consultation was a minute and a half.
So talk about jumping to conclusions based on a misunderstanding, misperception. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. My observation of her, no way is this woman suicidal. No way.
Uh-huh. But also, just making that connection and observing there are other things than suicidality that can make somebody not eat. Yep. So we have some questions from the audience, but before we get to those, could you just quickly summarize, the basic thing you're talking about, the importance of a therapist's understanding of character?
Yeah. The understanding arises from observation. My training and experience as a medical ergonomist, the focus is on character, the characteristic ways or ways that an individual protects themselves emotionally. And this leads to an understanding of how the individual, the person, functions emotionally. Mm-hmm. And this allows me to effectively treat. This understanding allows me to effectively treat the difficulties or the problems that people bring to treatment.
Yeah. Okay, great. So one question we have here is, how do you know that a patient can stand strong emotions? Because with several of these patients, strong emotions came up. How do you know they can tolerate it?
Yeah. Again, it's a moment-to-moment evaluation. The person certainly has no idea that I'm either thinking about the strength of whether they can tolerate the strength of emotion, but I'm constantly assessing that. It may not be in the forefront of my thinking, but I am observing the patient, how they're expressing themselves, mm-hmm. how they're holding back, what obstacles are they placing in the way, how do I then respond in pointing this out, and then I see what effect my intervention, although it doesn't look like an intervention, what effect it has. So it's a constant process.
Yeah, again, you just said something that we often mention that is just so fundamental in any social engagement, any work. We need to look at the effect we have, not what the intentions are, what's said, what is the actual effect, and that's again back to observation. So, yes. Yeah. So there was another question here about the second patient, the man. What else did he do to disconnect from himself emotionally besides this acting relaxed when he wasn't?
Well, in some fashion, he tried to control interactions so he wouldn't feel anxious. Mm-hmm. And there were myriad ways that he tried to control interactions. One could imagine that in his romantic relationships, he had to be in charge. Mm-hmm. This is a classic behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there was someone else asked about that second patient, just wondering how long he was in therapy, or is he still?
Well, he was in treatment with me for 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And then he stopped.
Uh-huh. Okay. Can you say anything about why, your understanding of why he stopped?
I think he had enough.
Yeah.
And I don't chase a patient.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, when he said he had enough in whatever fashion he said that, and I didn't let it go by. I certainly inquired or asked about that. Mm-hmm. He had enough.
Yeah.
And that was it.
And I think that's something that maybe we may not convey enough is we need to stay with where the patient is, what they're interested in, what they want to do. We may see things much deeper in them that they just either don't want to deal with or can't deal with. And you reminded me of the paper I wrote for the journal a number of years ago. I think it was called Motivations for Therapy. And one patient really wanted to dig in and go into the depths. Another one, we got to a point where he wasn't so depressed, the symptoms were better. And I said, we were at a point where we can either stop or we can look more deeply into it, think about it, come back. And he came back for one more session. And he said, it's like, do I want to try to live with the dragon that's in me or to slay the dragon? And he said, I don't think I have it in me to try to slay the dragon. I'm going to leave. And you know, he left feeling much better and happy with that. And I think that was really a good outcome. So.
Yeah. You see, I think what you're pointing out is that because we understand the person, how they function, their character, characteristic ways that they protect themselves, our understanding may we can see let's say the playing field, and I won't say we may want more for the patient, but we have to be very cognizant that we don't want more for the patient than they want for themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's hard sometimes because I know there are times where I've seen something in someone that I think they could tap into, but they just don't have it in them to do it. So,
right.
So let me see another question here. About the lady who lived with the bum. Said, did Dr. Chavis have her scream on the couch, or was the discussion with him sufficient?
She never was on the couch.
Okay.
It was sufficient for me to point out her smile.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that this allowed her to make better contact with the emotion, and especially the intensity of emotion,
mm-hmm.
allowed her to do what she needed to do for herself.
Uh-huh.
The fact that she came back at a subsequent session and said, my friends used to call me Smiley, that was confirmation that I was totally on the right track.
Yeah.
Just by pointing it out. I never said address the function of it. I just simply made the observation and reflected it back to her.
And again, that's so important, because I think a lot of people think therapy is about having the person understand the meaning, but just having it pointed out, them coming into contact without any other ideas about it is enough to change the emotional dynamics of no longer using that defense to handle it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So here's a good one of, what do you do if you can't really understand a person's character? What if you don't really find a point to hook in? Yeah,
that's an excellent question, because Dr. Baker has pointed out in his book, in particular Man in the Trap, that sometimes it can take the longest time to understand the patient. It may take years.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that what I've demonstrated in presenting the 3 patients and the 2 bonus patients is that you can address what you see.
Mm-hmm.
You may not understand or even identify the specific character or character structure, but what I do identify is, let's call it the emotional dynamic, the defense and the emotion. And then you see where that leads you. And see where it leads you and the patient.
Yeah. So there are several questions about the...
So can I just add one other thing? And so the patient's life can improve, and sometimes can improve dramatically.
Yeah.
That's without a specific character diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, I think, I think that's a great answer to that previous question. So going to a couple of questions about the woman in her 80s. One is, were you able to put the 80-year-old on the couch, or was it enough to just have her express her anger in the emails she never sent?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because she's still in treatment with me.
Okay.
And within the last month, I've begun to address her posture.
Uh-huh.
Her posture is like this. Her shoulders are like this.
Mm.
And so I introduced the idea of work on the tightness in her shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, I've begun to work biophysically or physically on the tense muscles of her neck and her shoulders.
Uh-huh.
And out comes a ton of emotion.
Uh-huh.
And she said, this is very painful. And we agreed that I would work just as much as she can tolerate, which is exactly the way it should be.
Yeah.
As tense as her shoulders look, I'm working on her neck first. Yeah. I worked on her shoulders a little bit. It was too much. I work on her neck very gently, and out comes a ton of feeling. And she said, I don't know how this works, she said. But at the end of the session, she says, but I feel better.
So again, a fundamental difference between what medical ergonomists do and so many other therapists and disciplines do. But so with that, could you say a little bit about the connection between her character and how that came up, and what you understand? How is this posture related to her character?
Yeah. She's a hysteric, okay? And hysterics traditionally, or a characteristic of the hysteric, is they run away from disturbing emotions. In her case, it was anger, or it is anger. And so I characterologically or character analytically addressed her anger and how she ran away from it. And I did that. She's been in treatment with me for 1.5 to 2 years. And I helped her enormously with that. So much so, as I said earlier, she said, "F you, bitch," which showed that I was on the right track.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, the problems that she had sleeping, which she did not happen every night, but she would not be able to sleep. She'd be crying. She'd be furious. This needed a more effective intervention. And so I prescribed a very gentle sleep med. It was not a sleeping medication. It was a very low dose of an antidepressant, which she took maybe 1 out of every 5 or 7 nights. But of recent, she's needed something more. And rather than prescribe a heavier medication, I suggested the biophysical work. And it's helped her enormously.
Okay, great. So also about that case, I think looking at some of the effects of therapy, someone asked, after the 80-year-old patient made contact with intense anger towards her daughter, did that relationship change at all, and how did her behavior toward her daughter or her daughter's behavior toward the patient change?
Yeah, an excellent question. If I can editorialize, the daughter is a wretch. And there's no way the daughter's behavior will change. She's cruel. She knows just how to torture her mother. And so the daughter's behavior certainly won't change. The mother's behavior, my patient's behavior, has changed. She no longer sends emails trying to make contact with her. She knows that the daughter will turn it around and use it against her in a cruel way. So she's no longer importunes the daughter. She doesn't try.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing that she can do. I haven't told her what to do, but we've discussed it, and she's come to the solution herself. She knows better. Because she's able to see the situation much more clearly and stand the disappointment that she experiences, that her own daughter rejects her in a murderous way, and I'm not exaggerating, in a murderous way, the love that that my patient has for her daughter.
So there's one question that maybe I will attempt to answer it because I think it's right up my alley, but you can comment. Do you make a distinction between a person's character and their personality? And then also, are people in their healthy core naturally different, for example, being extrovert or introvert, their energy level, talents, the ways of dealing with problems, etc., or are healthy people basically the same? So I would refer people to my paper, Nature, Character, Personality. It's I think it's volume 27-2, something like that, 1992. It's actually on the ACO website, on the journal. But I don't go into a lot about differences in the nature, but I have no question that we're all born with a different nature. And if you look at chimpanzees, Jane Goodall studies, each chimpanzee had a very different nature. So humans, I think, are very much the same. But it's really a great question. And the distinction between character and personality, yes, I think there is a distinction. There are the 3 layers. There's the core, the secondary layer, and the facade. The personality is the layer of the facade. But I talk about all that in that paper. So then a couple of other questions that in some way are related. Dr. Chavis has implied he can nail someone's character within the first few seconds. Has he ever been wrong or surprised by what he later learns with more time with the patient. And the other question, maybe we can tie this in together. Can you give an example of when an observation or experiment was a little off or not right on, or maybe the patient wasn't ready to hear what you had to say, and how you then handled that moment?
Well, how I function is I generally don't jump to a conclusion. It's just I'll say my nature, or how I am, is that I observe.
Mhm.
And that's like an intrinsic quality of mine. So I don't rush. I don't feel compelled to make a character diagnosis.
Mhm.
Again, I let what I see impress itself upon me. And this is not theoretical. This is practical, and it's real, and it's practical. And so there are times when I may think that somebody is of a particular, has a particular character, and then over time, things emerge, or behaviors emerge, or
Mhm.
more characteristics emerge, where I may question my diagnosis and change it.
Mhm.
And so I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as I talk about, this differentiating observations from conclusions, it's very clear to me that a character diagnosis is a conclusion based on all of our observations. And a scientific approach is, if you've made the wrong conclusion and the data don't fit it, don't try to fit the data to your conclusion, revise your conclusion. So, one other question about the 80-year-old woman is she expressing rage and sadness, or both?
It's unfortunate. I say unfortunate because of her life's history, that there's both.
Uh-huh.
She lost a parent at a very early age.
Yeah.
And it's had
Yeah.
a profound impact on her entire life.
Yeah. But what your reaction right there, Dr. Chavis, that's something that I think people need to know and see, is that we are terribly, deeply affected by our patients. And that's how we can do our work. As I said, if we can connect with the human being, the health in them, and allow ourselves to feel what they're experiencing, we can help them out of it. So, yeah. There's one other question that has to do with someone curious about, from their discipline, becoming a medical ergonomist. I won't attempt to, I don't think this is the forum to answer that, but if the staff could write that question down and send it to Dr. Chavis and me to look at how we might respond to that. So, Dr. Chavis, are there any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with? I mean, it's just wonderful what you've told us about, but any final thoughts you want to leave them with?
Well, simply to reiterate what I've said before, that through my training and my experience as a medical ergonomist, I observe the person in front of me. I see how they present themselves. I see that includes the characteristic or characterologically determined ways that they protect themselves emotionally. And this leads to an understanding of how the person functions emotionally. This leads to me effectively addressing the difficulties and the problems that they bring to treatment.
You keep mentioning the training, and it just affects me how crucial the College of Orgonomy has been in you having the training you've had, me having the training I've had. I know I couldn't do the work I do without the depth of the training that the college has provided. So, yeah. So again, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, Dr. Chavis, and telling us about these patients and bringing in your bonus patients. That's what's so great about this approach is it allows us just the freedom to, okay, we don't have to just stay with that, things can come up. And believe it or not, sometimes things happen spontaneously, and we can use them and teach from them. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Chavis.
You're very welcome.
How do you feel after listening to Dr. Chavis's cases? What do you think? Listening to Dr. Chavis discuss his patients reminded me about my very first therapy appointment with a medical ergonomist. It was clear to me that in that first session, he got me, and I still remember how much relief there was for me to be truly seen and heard. If you're interested to hear how I became a medical ergonomist, stay tuned for the next episode where I'm interviewed by Dr. Crist. And I remember driving home, and I was just so excited about nothing. We were driving home, through the woods on the highway, and just looking out, seeing trees. It could be like a terrible sign on the side of the highway. And I was just excited to see a sign, to see the trees. And I just remember they were kind of like, what is going on with you? Because I just was talkative. I just was alive and just happy to be experiencing a drive home from the therapist.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, what you said, excited about nothing, but my first reaction is what you just said. You were excited about feeling alive.
Yeah.
Didn't matter what the alive was about, but just feeling alive.
Yeah.
Great.
And it's like I didn't know that I wasn't alive. I didn't have this complaint of feeling dead or feeling depressed, but it's like I was all of those things and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah. Well, you don't know what you don't have until you feel it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are interested in your questions and comments, and I would love to hear your feedback. Send an email to aco@orgonomy.org. The best way to help the ACO spread its knowledge is by letting others know about us. I hope you'll share this podcast with your friends and family and let them know about our work. You can connect with us at orgonomy.org or adifferentkindofpsychiatry.com. I'm Dr. Chris Burrett. Thank you for listening to the A Different Kind of Psychiatry podcast with the ACO. Since 1968, the psychiatrists affiliated with the American College of Orgonomy have been helping patients discover greater satisfaction, health, and overall well-being in their lives, whether patients suffer with mental illness, struggle with addiction, or feel unsatisfied with their work lives or relationships. Medical orgone therapy, as practiced by the physicians at the ACO, offers a way forward, often without the use of medication.